Guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Bind, and today I want to have a little chat about detail in your artwork. Also, this is edition 2 of the broken cup handle. It will become, I think, a meme on my channel soon. So guys, have you ever asked yourself this question while painting? When am I done? Am I done? Is this enough? Should I keep going for a couple of hours, or should I put more detail? Does that make it better? And when do I stop? So I think a lot of people have asked themselves these questions, and if you're one of them, this video is for you. So let's say this. There are many artworks out there by professionals and known artists for like past centuries even, that have very different levels of detail to them. For example, if you look at the Mona Lisa, La Gioconde, you will find that that painting does not have any detail. Well, it's another thing, because I should not say any detail, because what is actually detail, right? So I would say that there is nothing that separates detail from not detail, if you really think about it, right? Because the very first strokes that you put on the canvas, the very first shapes, compared to nothing, they already contain some detail, right? And then what we describe as detail from that point on is just increments of putting more stuff in certain areas and defining some areas more than others. So in reality, it's arbitrary description, I think. In the real world, there is only detail, you could argue. You look through stuff through a microscope, everything has the same detail. It doesn't end, it's almost infinite detail until you go down to the very atomic level, right? So, but that doesn't help us, because we're artists and we're painting, making photographs, that kind of stuff. So if you have a photograph, you take a picture of the real world, and then people would say there's more detail in one than there is in the other. But what does that really mean? I think what that means is that there's more stuff in one photograph that reveals detail through contrast than there is in others. Because if you just shoot a wall from a certain distance, there is no detail, even though we know that this wall has the same level of detail as everything else. It's just not revealed to you at a certain distance, right? So I think that's really what it comes down to, and that's what we mean by detail, especially when it comes to the real world. And then we emulate this in painting, and the wall just becomes then a flat color maybe, and therefore will be perceived as having no detail, right? In reality, this is just the case because it's the best approximation of painting in a specific medium of that wall. Because if you were to put detail, and everybody knows this too, you can simply very easily overdo it and have a wall like that is 100 meters away, and then you put all the detail that you wouldn't even see in real life, which makes the whole thing feel artificial and fake. And I think a lot of people have also experienced this. So all of this just to say that wrestling with the amount of detail is, I think, an art in itself. So I recently got out the artwork from my lengthy tutorial series and decided to put some more details in it just for a showcase. So let's jump into that and have a little more talk about what actually makes that detail work or not, and how much of it you actually need. So guys, this little time lapse, of course, because as you might imagine, this adding detail can really take some time, right? So I think I did this for a couple of hours, so I think about 4 hours. So yeah, I figured you don't need to watch 4 hours, so that's what a time lapse is for. Yeah, actually. Um, so we're just hanging out for a little bit while I explain to you a little bit of the process. So the original thing, to paint it, it took me like it was tutorial, 5-part tutorial that you can look up on the channel. The tutorial took 9 hours, but I think of that 5 hours maybe was just the talking, or let's say half of it was the talking. So we had 4.5 hours of painting maybe, and then another maybe 4 hours here. So you would come out at like 9, maybe 10 hours, something like that, which is not like super much, but it's also not very little. You can easily spend 20 hours or more on on a painting like that, adding more and more layers of detail. So yeah, what I'm doing now is I'm just focusing on the midground, making that one better. And on the way, as you can see, where I see little incorrections that are like of the nature, like they're either oversights or just stuff that I did not pay attention to while doing the tutorial, because the tutorial painting was completely live, talking while painting, which is something I still find it pretty difficult, to be honest with you. So now this is not talking while painting, this is me concentrating, but yeah, taking it easy, listening to some music, and then just trying to see where I want more detail. So it's very interesting, the railing there, you can see it should actually overlap the building, but I completely did not see it while first painting it. So the more complicated stuff is, the more structures you have, the more oversights there are going to be. So this is now me trying to make the reflections on the water better. So I'm doing a little experiment here, not sure how it's going to turn out, but rearranging those layers, because you cannot just turn stuff upside down and then expect it to be a perfect reflection, because stuff is layered backwards. So what that means is you will anchor on different layers into the flat ground, which in this case is the water surface. So that's why I'm rearranging these in terms of height, because that's actually much more accurate in terms of the real reflection, how it would be, right? And to be very honest with you, the closer the reflection is, the less accurate you can make it through this process alone. Because what would happen is, if it's close, you will start have an angle where you look on the water surface, and then through that mirror look upwards, so you see structures underneath what you would not be able to see in what you've already painted. Therefore, there is information that you just don't have that would show up in the reflection. But the more distant reflections like this, they are possible to do them like this, especially if you then like I do, blur them a little bit. And now you see me playing around with the grade of blur I want to have, and the degree of integration into the actual surface, because you cannot have reflection just be the same. It would be very boring and also not very accurate, because the reflection, like especially in natural water, would be much duller than the stuff they are reflecting, right? So in order for it to be believable at all, you will need some color changes, slight blueing, and then dulling it down a little bit. And then what I'm doing now is I'm painting over this where the ripples are, to make this integrate into what was there before. And to be honest, I found this pretty difficult, because usually I do one approach or the other, and in this case I was trying to combine two different approaches. The first being the original painting, just very rough approximation of the reflection that I painted by hand, and then this effect to make it integrate is not that easy. So maybe if you want to try this, if this frustrates you, that could very well be the reason. So it's always hard to combine different methods, because that is also a matter of style eventually. So then I'm deleting. Now we have several layers that overlay each other for the water surface. And there's basically the one I painted, and then there's the one that I created the cutout reflection with the motion blur from. And now I'm painting over both of them to make them integrate, blend together, smudge them a little bit into each other, so that they will end up creating one nice image of the reflection. And you're not, because you should not be able to distinguish technically how things are done. We still want to paint, it's still an illusion of brush strokes, right? And it should, in my opinion, work like that. If it looks too artificial, I personally don't like it that much. So that's, by the way, why I never got into photo bashing at all, because I just don't like it. Sure, you can get amazing results, but I just always feel like it's not my work. But yeah, that's just me. So now this water is coming together a little bit better, but yeah, this takes a fairly long time. And now I'm painting in, because I figured that in order to make this really even better, I need to make original strokes again that really have the style of the rest of the painting, other than it just being like that stylized motion blur. Also, of course, trying to take into account that the ripples are on the water surface are not the same everywhere, right? So you have wind influencing that, and then you want more ripples on in some spaces than in others. If it's just the same amount everywhere, it becomes pretty boring. And then there is the bright, very bright area where you only have bright sky reflecting, which then you almost don't see any ripple manifesting at all. So that is then just a stylistic choice, I would say. It is something that is possible in reality, and it sometimes happens and it sometimes doesn't happen. So if you look up reflections of water surfaces, you will find all kinds of variations. There's like little ripples with like a breeze, and then there's very stronger ones with the strong winds, and sometimes it's almost none, because there is no wind or nothing influencing that surface. So yeah, be aware of that. There's just like with the sky, there's very many options to go with. The only thing I would say you have to avoid is that tonally and contrast wise you do something that is not possible, therefore does not look believable as water, right? So we're getting there, I think. Yeah, once you pay attention and really look into that mirror, you find many structures. And also the thing is that you look for new ways to break it up in interesting ways, so that you just, as I said before, don't only have the perfect reflection, but also have is something that is a little bit stylized and interesting and is still painterly. Because um, I think, and again, that is just my opinion, uh, I don't want to hide the fact that it's painted, right? I want people to see that I actually made brushstrokes and there is a stylistic choice of those brushstrokes. If not, it would just be, yeah, it's just not my style to hide the roughness of the stroke. And I think people go through, yeah, periods of different stylistic choices, and that's a part of finding your style, right? I used to be spend even much more time and then try to be more perfect, and that I think is my nature. Is I'm obsessing, and then I'm very patient, which can also be a detriment, because if you're too patient you will just um, find no end, which also is quite on topic if you're talking about when am I done with my artwork, right? So if you just have infinite patience, you will never be done, and you will just think, oh, it's yeah, I can endure this, but you don't realize that after a certain point, if you're lacking the skill, no matter how patient you are, your artwork just won't get any better, right? So that is what I would call having too much patience, and uh, I was like that. And I also talked about this in the other video where I remade my first ever digital artwork, which, yeah, is pretty much showcasing exactly that. Going from an artwork that had a lack of skill and too much patience applied to it, basically, to going to something that took much less time, but with a much more skill, you can pull it off in a fraction of a time, and it will be much better, because it's about the decisions you make. And I talked about this also a lot in the tutorial, or in my tutorials, that it's really the style is one thing, but the choices that you make tonally and structurally, design wise, shape wise, is another thing. And then that if you make those choices good choices, then uh, you will get a good artwork no matter the style that you apply to it. So now what we're doing, as you can see, I made a pretty big correction on that ship, because I figured it's time for that to come and be more detailed. And I realized that those wings were not really on the same level, which, of course, yeah, it was almost shocking that I didn't notice this. But again, it's like if your attention is just divided through the process, yeah, it can easily happen, because those spaceships are essentially, they are free-form structures that you just design them on the fly. In this case, did not have a model for this, did not have a ref for this, so I just designed it on the spot. And then yeah, that can really be complicated, because you have to understand your own shape, and the more complicated you make it, the more you make it difficult for yourself to understand it, basically. So now I'm putting more detail to that. And what you can see is that sometimes I put the strokes and I erase against them. And I do this to not have them be too standing out too much. I want them to integrate, and I don't want it to be perfect, and I want to keep a little bit of the roughness in that shape, because I know that roughness, it will give you some texture, it will give you some feeling, even now from the reflection to the more matte material. And if you make this too perfect, you will never see the end of it, and it will lose a lot of its appeal, because those imperfections imply detail that you can just imagine, which once you clean it up too much, it's no longer possible to imagine that. So and those shapes basically they get better when you can interpret them a little bit more freely. So now I'm really seeing where to intersect shapes and make this a little bit more believable. And of course, you can overdo this easily. And what you will then do basically is you will destroy your sense of scale, because if you have that much, you think you're putting detail, but if you're doing it, you must realize that one stroke in terms of size is massive on the structure, because this is a giant structure, and you cannot have that many details showing up that big or that clear for it to still be I think you will what will happen is you will make it too clumsy in terms of stroke technique, and then it will look like a blown up miniature. So that's what I'm trying to avoid always. That is where you will just imagine this ship has many more intersections of material that on this distance you can just not see them, at least not on this level of detail. So you have to just leave them out, right? There is no solution for this. Because now if you introduce the tiny strokes that are not in the rest of the painting, then it will look out of place, because then you will feel like this is over detailed and the rest is under detailed, which is a bad thing. You need always to keep the consistency, right? So yeah, I want to make this nose more interesting. And yeah, that's kind of working out just now, but and I'm also not too happy with the graphic design on the side here. It looks not correct from what I was expecting. So I'm changing the shape and making new kind of a logo, which then I like it much more. Because all of these roundings are pretty complicated. They're not just circles, right? There's just a lot of angles to that. So sometimes you have to just try it out until you feel like you hit the shape that does not look wrong in that case. And that is really an art form. And there's people that do nothing else but just paint vehicles, and that's their only job, and they're amazing at it. So naturally, if you're painting everything like me, I'm more of an all-rounder. I will not have the best detailed buildings, I will not have the best detailed spaceships, I will not have the best detailed people, but I can usually combine them in a pleasing way and make a composition that is appealing, right? So yeah, you have to be aware of what you're doing and where are your limitations. So now we're slowly getting to more detail, and then once in a while comparing that with the older version, which you cannot see it because the time lapse is a little bit too fast for that. I just have a copy of the old version on top, which I sometimes look at it to see my progress, right? And this is something I also talked about in the tips and tricks videos, where I said it's a good idea to track your progress just by means of having an older version as a combined layer on top that you just can look at where you came from, right? Pretty soon I think this at least the big ship is getting where I'm quite happy with it. In the end, we'll see a comparison of the whole thing, right? Yeah, that was that. You see that chittering was the comparison I made, because I really then needed to compare for myself and to see then, okay, there's a whole different level of detail. Am I being consistent enough? And this is not to be, again, it's just a rough control mechanism, and for you to be able to see the next level of detail that you introduced, and then to be able to judge it and have it be roughly the same. And another great tip I can give for this is to never have, you should be aware of your smallest brush sizes, right? Because your smallest brush size will also limit you in terms of what detail you can put, and that is a very good thing. So usually in this painting, I'm never, even on the small brushes, I'm never below a 12 pixel brush or something like this, because I feel that I will just make too thin strokes if I am below that threshold, and then that's how I control my brush strokes. I just look at the pixel count, the sheer pixel count, and then decide, okay, I'm not going any lower than that. So that works out usually pretty well. I did a little more correction on the nose. Because the thing is that where detail amasses, you want to get perspective and the feeling of the shape right. And then where there is nothing going on in the shape, it's not so problematic, because your mind will fill the gaps, right? So then, yeah, applying a little bit more lights, very tiny ones, to put emphasis again on the scale, which that is also something that of course the detail can do for you. If you put more, if you feel like you can look into it and there's will be even more detail, that of course gives you a sense of scale. So I would say that is harder to convey with a simple rough painting than if you put, like, if you hit a sweet spot of details, you will really convey the size and the that scale. A little bit of passive shading of the shape. So yeah, slowly, and this is looking pretty good. And guys, this is also something, if you think, yeah, he's full of himself, he's saying it's pretty good, and also, no, this is not what I mean. You should be able to look at your stuff and say this is getting pretty good. This is just, be objective about it. If you do something good, recognize it and call it out. If you do something bad, you will hear me say the same thing. You will hear me say, okay, this is shit, I need to change it right now. That is how you become more professional, if you get the distance to your own work, and then, which is very difficult admittedly, right? But if you can look at your stuff and really judge it almost like somebody else, which you will never fully be able to do, but then you're getting somewhere, because you're like, okay, this came together nice, I hit this right, but not this, and then you know what to do, right? So now the background needs to come up just a little bit in terms of the feeling of these details. And I want to change the cloud because before the cloud was pierced nicely by the wing, and afterwards it just aligned a little bit too much because remember I changed the position of that wing to match the other side better. So then I decided is no longer I will enhance the clouds but also put them a little bit more down to not have that bright tip pierce into the bright tip of the cloud, which is a composition decision basically. And then I give some cloud shadow a little bit, where you can feel just a little bit more 3D in the clouds going on, which I didn't want to overdo it here because it's a bright kind of a little bit how would you call it, humid air in the background that is a little bit giving a glow. And now I'm trying out just last things with the water to have these like a little bit of intersecting ripples. And then I think I delete some of them again, and now I need the feeling of some bigger ripples and some darker shapes on the water surface to just give a little bit of the feeling of it coming at you the same way that it does in the middle, which then I think that is very logical and it also works out. Yeah, more painting of those, which is like a little pattern of how like a wind could blow on the surface and create, as I said before, some more ripples in some places than in others. And now it's just last touch-ups that I absolutely could not ignore, and then a little bit more detail in the middle where is the focal point really of this image. Try to put out a little flagpole. In the first I wanted to match like the colors of the artificial light, but then I realized they would look too fake, so I decided to change it here so that it will integrate better, right? So a little bit on the water back there, so that there's also the feeling of there's something going on still back there. You could have left this alone, but I just felt like there needed to be a little bit of an irritation, right? And now it's like dark parts that I put on for long, put off, I should say. And then what you can, I mean, you don't realize that too much because it's dark and dark, but if you bring detail a little bit up, then yeah, you get some nice, better depth in the dark parts there on the right hand side. So, and then lastly, it's yeah, there was a glow before I enhanced the image, and I did away with it, and then now I'm doing a little bit of a new post-processing, a little bit slight bit of blending to make this some more passive shadows and a little bit more blending over some areas to make this yeah, I've called this the anti-studio effect quite some times, which just means that you're changing color hues with overlay blending or normal blending in the very end to just make everything not so much the same, right? So tonally, that is, and color wise, I think that always works out pretty good. So, and then in a moment we will be done here. That was the wrong layer effect, definitely. So yeah, guys, let's compare this quickly. I think that is it. Now, you remember we came from this painting, and then now we arrived at this. So guys, there you have it. A little demo for you. I hope you like this. Still a little recap on this. So I think what it comes down to, and you could see this, is that there is, I think, a sweet spot for the level of detail. And this sweet spot is not so easily found, and that is the problem why people get confused with this. So because it depends on a number of things. I would say it depends on the media that you're going to produce. Are you going to produce a big poster, or are you going to produce a small image that just needs to function like a storyboard? So it's very different levels of detail depending on the media that you're planning to do. So let's say you're doing full-blown artwork, right? So then I think the level of detail still has some variables to it. And maybe one of the biggest is your personal style, because every style communicates detail in a different way. And depending on the style you choose and the brushwork or the line work, all of that influences the readability of the detail. So I'm sorry that there is no simple answer for you, but I think the answer is something like you have to find out for yourself, but don't put the blinders on and just look at your stuff. Look at other stuff. Look at how other people do it. You will get an idea of the ballpark that you're moving in, and that is, I think, very important, because I see this also a lot with students who are inexperienced. The urge to zoom in there and then do the insane detail that no professional would ever do. And that is called losing sight of what is important. And that is called maybe giving the detail an amount of importance that it does not deserve, right? Because detail that works, it will work in composition, in context to all the other stuff, and not just by itself. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think about this topic. Leave your comments down below. Hope you like the artwork with the improved detail. A link will be down below, this time for real, on ArtStation. You can download this. I think I forgot to put it on last time. So yeah, sorry for that. This time, if you want it, get it down below. Talk to you next time.